Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the serverless architecture. And just real quick about me, I'm fairly new to the Commerce7 world, but I've been doing winery e-commerce stuff for almost 15 years, back when I met Andrew. Um, so not a stranger to that. So I did just publish a MailChimp integration, and that was kind of my first one. And I kind of built a template that I want to use for future integrations. And I think it's pretty neat. And so I wanted to, in the spirit of Michael's presentation, to kind of share what's going on behind the curtain, so that other people can kind of learn. So real quick, the kind of old way of doing things is usually people have a Unix box. It's running in their closet, or maybe they've got it hosted on, Amazon or Google or one of those. You send something to it. If it fails for whatever reason, it's gone. When you have a server, you have to figure out how much memory, how much processing power you need. And if you guess wrong, your server's going to crash. And then a big thing is security. I am not a great Unix admin, so I would always get nervous and ask for help whenever I was setting up a Unix box for something. And then, of course, you have to keep that box patched and up to date. And sometimes if you run an update, it's going to bring your server down while it's updating. And then you've got all of your stuff kind of tightly coupled on that one box. And if that box goes down, you're hurting. There's some, so this is kind of how like WineDirect or even Bin65, well, I guess AR WineDirect used to do things. It's how most of the world works, I think, probably 90%. Let's see. So the new way, so this is kind of based on my MailChimp integration, but this is kind of the recipe that I'm using now for future integrations. I'm going to run through this real quick, and then we'll dive into each piece and circle back to it. So Commerce7 hits my API gateway, and I basically take that message and stick it in a queue and tell Commerce7 we're good here. So there's pretty much no way I'm going to fail to respond. I was always worried about Commerce7 turning off my webhooks if there were too many failures. So I built my own queue so that I can manage my own failures. So I take the message, I stick it in my queue, I split my queue out, so I have bulk updates and kind of customer onboarding going into one queue, so that if somebody's loading 100,000 customers, it's not mingling with the kind of day-to-day rapid fire stuff. And then I've got over on the right those two Lambda processors that pull things off of the queue, process it, and send it off to MailChimp. So if MailChimp servers are down, or if it just rejects the request for whatever reason, as it frequently does, it goes back in the queue and we try again. So it's very similar to Commerce7's web services, where if they fail to deliver, they'll try again over and over until they succeed or eventually give up. So I've just kind of brought that into my space here. And then using Dynamodb, which is just a NoSQL database for the settings. So not actually storing any data ever. So it just kind of comes in, passes through, and goes out the other side. So real quick, AWS, most of you probably heard of it. I'm going to be talking about it here, but there's a Microsoft and Google version of everything I'm talking about. The nice thing with AWS, and I think the other services too, there's a free tier. So if you just want to go out and play with it, there's no risk of blowing up your credit card or anything. So the API gateway, that's the first thing that gets hit. Sorry if I'm talking fast. I'm trying to get through this thing. So the nice thing is the NoSQL database, the queues, the Lambdas, they don't even have an IP address. You couldn't get to them if you wanted to. The only way to get to them are through the API gateway, which of course are tuned to handle hundreds of thousands of concurrent API calls without a problem. So when you hit that gateway, I've got a little Lambda function that checks your credentials to make sure you're even allowed to pass. And then you can put restrictions on IP address and all that stuff. I'm going to skip version management. It's cool and interesting, but takes a bit to explain. And then you can do throttling and all that to kind of, if you want to say you're not allowed to hit this thing more than 1 million times a minute or whatever. And then the cool thing it does is it's called a proxy to a Lambda, and Lambdas, we're going to get into that next, but it basically takes the whole request and just passes it off without changing it or touching it. So you have all of the request information that kind of goes into there. So Lambda is my new favorite thing ever. It's kind of the backbone of serverless. So if you create a Lambda function, it literally brings up a little code editor. You write your code, and then you can just run it. You don't have to set up your dev environment. You don't have to have Apache running or install Node or anything like that. Let's see, the auto scaling. So basically, if something hits your Lambda request, it just Amazon throws some memory and processing at it, and it runs. If 1,000 things hit your Lambda request, it can run them all concurrently, and Amazon just throws more processing and memory at it. And then you're only charged per millisecond the code is executing. A big thing with servers, if you have a Unix box running, you're being charged for that thing to run all through the night, even though maybe there's almost no traffic hitting it. So that's Lambda in a nutshell. And then the queuing service, this is really cool. So it you put messages into it, and it's a first in, first out queue. And if an order is updated, and we go and we tell MailChimp, hey, this order was updated, and MailChimp says, no comprende, don't know what that means. We'll try again 5 seconds later, and then usually MailChimp says, oh, I understand now. But it could be anything. It could be that the server is down. It could be a bug in my code. I've obviously never had a bug in my code to date, but if that should happen, it will keep trying, it'll keep failing, and then eventually it goes into what's called a dead letter queue. So it kicks it off to the side into another queue. So the data's still not lost, it's still there. But that's kind of, then I get an alert to like, let's go look at this thing and see what happened. In the very, very beginning when I first launched it, that was happening quite a bit. Wasn't necessarily bugs, but it was kind of some data stuff I wasn't expecting. So most of it were things that like, oh, it's fine to ignore this and keep going. And then, yeah, it can serve as a trigger for Lambda. So you can tell your Lambda function, just anytime a message appears in this queue, pull it off the stack and go process it. And then Dynamodb is pretty straightforward. It's a NoSQL serverless database, unlimited size, unlimited throughput. It's got some caching stuff built in that you can just click a button and turn it on. And then multiple availability zones. It's just if one of the Amazon data centers falls into the ocean, it's fine. The data, well, it's not fine for the people in that data center, but for your data, it's fine because it's replicated somewhere else in another physical building. So I just want to circle back on this now that you know kind of what all of these pieces do. So the API gateway, again, is, as it says, it's a gateway. So anything behind that, there's no IP address. You can't get to it. So you can't like go try to hack my database by brute forcing passwords or something. It's impossible. So the first thing it does, hand it off to a Lambda function. It's a very, very tiny Lambda function that does nothing but pass the message into the queue. I know, Andrew, you were curious like how similar my setup is to your setup. I think one big difference is you guys are using Fargate, which is a containerization of Lambda functions, which was just one extra step of complexity that I didn't think made sense for the size of my project and the size of my team. But other than that, so the Lambdas can scale infinitely, the database can scale infinitely, the queues can scale infinitely. So if you hit me with 1 million requests or over the holidays or whatever it is, it's fine. And I did some quick math. I didn't have a huge data set, but by the end of January, there's a little over a dozen wineries using the MailChimp integration. And it's costing me about 15 cents per winery per month. That's just because it's, hits that Lambda function that executes, in a fraction of a second, and you get charged for a fraction of a second of compute time. So the cost savings versus running a database server and running a Unix server are pretty huge. That's it. So serverless, I just think they're neat. They're super secure, super scalable, super fast, easy to maintain, and cheap.
Awesome. Thanks, Bodhi. I think it'd be great if like you and Jason had a conversation, compared some of the stuff that we're doing. I know that when I first started Commerce7, before Jason came on board, a lot of the Amazon was too complex for me. So I know, like, for people starting out, I know Pablo uses Amazon, but other of you guys might find some complexity in there. But in the spirit of sharing, it'd be great if you guys did reach out to Bodhi or even Jason on our team about